In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Course Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. True strength is not in hiding your pain, but in sharing it with those who can help carry the load. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're diving into men's wellness, navigating cultural expectations, and building a supportive community. Our guest today is Linda Tilson, creator and co-host of the Men Room Show. Linda has built a unique space dedicated to fostering open, judgment-free conversation amongst men, encouraging vulnerability, personal growth, and meaningful connections. Through initiatives like the Men's Circle, she offers men a space to explore their inner selves, breaking down societal expectations and building healthier relationships. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your support helps more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Miss Linda Tilson, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you, Sam.
Well, it's great to have you here. We have both a personal and professional relationships, and what you're doing is so incredibly important. So I'm so happy to be able to platform you. To kick us off, please tell us more about what you're doing with the Men's Room Show.
Yes, I am the creator and co-host of the Men's Room Show on YouTube. And what I'm doing in that space is I'm building a community, and I'm building a community of men who can come around and have that space to be able to speak freely without judgment, really talk about what's on his mind. And really, in that space, it's evolved. It's more than just a podcast. I mentioned here it's a community. And in that work, I realized that men needed a space where they could confide in other men, to be able to confide in other individuals. And so I created an offshoot, the Men's Circle. And so we do weekly sessions online. They're non-recorded, where we talk about issues that the men bring up every week. And in that work, a lot of men were reluctant to want to come to a space where a woman would be present. I got challenged on that. And I'm like, hey, why would that be a problem? Because you can get other perspectives from other genders. There's nothing that communication can't solve in relationships. And so the Men's Circle is one such place. And what the men would find when they would come in, that it wasn't a support group to fix broken men. That's not what it is at all. It's an empowering space where someone could be going through something difficult and need to be able to speak to it and have other people weigh in through a facilitated conversation. However, a lot of the times we are champion other men to be able to step into a space of empowerment when it comes to their business. It becomes, how they lead in their organizations. It could be how they show up as a father or a partner. It's all these different things. And so they come in and they're presently surprised about the space, about what it is and what it can be. And I will kid you not, they come in 1 or 2 times. And a lot of times they become frequent visitors in our circle because we can sit around a circle and have those deep conversations.
And that work is in my opinion so important. And I wanted to truly deep dive right away into the meaning of what you're doing, as I think it is fantastic. But for you, obviously, as a woman, when did you get this realization that you know what? I think men ought to be heard and men ought to talk to each other, and I ought to do something about it. What was this aha moment?
That's a really good question, Sam, because it's kind of evolved a little bit over time. I will say that I was really surprised when I got invited by a Canadian individual to come into a space called the Voice of Men 360. So it's an organization that helps men and boys in this particular fashion. And I really was invited to come in and talk on their podcast about my personal journey. And in my personal journey, ever since I've been 12, I've been that voice for people who didn't have one. I've been that person that's spoken up for what is right when I see that something's not being well serving for people. And so really I did that podcast. And what happened is I got to learn more about International Men's Day. And in the United States, we have Movember, where you celebrate men in that way. And so it was an offshoot of like, oh, International Men's Day, we can have an event. And I thought, if I want to have an event and I want men to come, well, I got to make it inviting and something they'd want to be a part of. And so no man's going to sign up for therapy, right? So that's how the idea of the Men's Room Show was born, because there's a radio show here in Washington State, KISW News and Radio, and they would do segments called the Men's Room where they would banter about men's issues. And so I got the idea from that. And I thought, well, what if we have weekly interviews, panel interviews, where we bring the guys together and we have a conversation around subjects that may be difficult to talk about. Some of them might be exciting to talk about. It doesn't make a make difference which spectrum you're on. And we just get together and do that. So what we did was week after week to showcase and celebrate the event that we were putting on, we would do that. And I will kid you not, we had the event. It was wonderful and meaningful. And when we were done, the guys are like, we don't want to stop doing this. We like being a part of this. So it's changed and shifted from a panel interview of a select number of men that have volunteered to one-off interviews with panel interviews interspersed when it makes sense.
Wow, it's very interesting. In your observation, and you feel free to give me a ballpark or just your best interpretation of that questions. But when you look at this modern world, especially the Western world, which we're both a part of, it's a little bit closer to us. How much of a crying need do you think platforming men and making sure that we hear them truly is? Can you extend your thoughts a little bit about just the significance of the problem?
Oh, well, the significance of the problem is that a lot of organizations, for example, or even society, create spaces for women to go. And so women in leadership, you always hear a lot of programs. Imagine if you had a men in leadership program. I think people would say that that was not right and that men already have privileges and opportunities. And what are you doing giving them another hand up? And I'm like, no, that is not right. Both genders should have places and spaces where they're championed. And that's why I am so passionate about this space, because I've heard men say before, like, let's say organizations want to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and they have programs and they talk about different groups of individuals, culturally, technically, all the different threads that you can go into with DEIB, and they will say, it's not for me. And I'm like, oh, it's not for you, huh? That is a problem. And so because I heard that it's not for me, I went into, places and spaces where I could bring like TED Talks with men talking about men's issues. And I did that intentionally because I wanted something for the men to be able to grab onto, not just the ladies. And really, with the men and the ladies watching these particular TED Talks, what I found was everyone was just so thankful and I guess thoughtful, I guess, about how they could approach things differently as we watched these different talks. We had these facilitated discussions or reflection questions afterward. They really enjoyed that. And so, bringing it in and making sure that you're not one side or the other, not all for men, or not all for women. It's the best way because really we're interconnected where we live, work, and our relationships. It's really important that we understand each other because we all hear those thoughts where someone will say, all men do this. The women will say that, and then the men will say, all women do, you know, and you got that dynamic going. And so you can say, yes, that may look that way, but let me share with you, another perspective that maybe you don't know about. And so that's where the lessons really start to come through because a lot of women think they know what men need and men think that they know what women need. And it's through those conversations that those aha moments come up. It happens to me all the time. And because, I can champion men's wellness and what they need, I can't do this work without asking the question. I can't do it if I'm not getting curious and asking questions because, even just setting up the definition of what is a masculine man, I could say what I think he should be, but what he think he should be, it could be different, could be the same, could be small aha moments.
Sure, absolutely. In your plan truly as I see unfold is not this understanding of solely empowering men. It's more a response to this ideology in which we ought to empower women and therefore men feel a little bit perhaps emptier with the space they can enter, with the conversation they may have, with their opinions about themselves and the world that they ought to or ought to not to have, which is quite problematic. Would you say when you're thinking of this vision unfolding, one thing that I always thought to be a reality, and I think is showing across the study of humankind across history, but with stronger men, we have more virtuous and safer women, and therefore it's just an empowerment for everybody involved. Where do you think? And this is a tough question, but where do you think this toughness, this reluctance on masculinity comes from?
Okay. So it's a lot of society says. And so over time, you always look at the generations before and really, it's been valued that a man needs to be harder so he can stand up to things, to people, to circumstances, and that it's his responsibility to provide and protect. So when you are expected to provide and protect, it's probably natural that you would have to say, I've got to be a little tough. I've got to be, uh, I can't be soft because if I'm soft, then people are going to walk all over me. If I'm soft, I look like I'm not owning my responsibility. If I'm soft, people might not think that I'm capable. And so really, it's not really a soft versus hard issue, which is what we need to change because I, in a situation, was in a conversation where we were asking another man, how do you describe masculine man, right? A masculine man, how do you describe who he is? And so the words weren't hard and soft. The words were what I chose to share right now, which is owning responsibility, being a man of your word and integrity, providing and protecting for those around you. That's really what the definition was. And so you need to be a blend of soft and hard to be able to do that because you've got to emotionally connect to people. And if you're hard, I don't know that that's going to happen. But yet you need to be responsible. And so being responsible, there's a softness there, actually. If you think about that, you have to be someone who's humble, somebody who can say that I made a mistake. And that's not being hard. That's just, come into the situation a little on the softer side about like admitting that you're human and that you need forgiveness and assistance just like anyone else. And so that nurturing side is really important. And actually women want to be around nurturers. And so if men want to get closer to women and if they can have that softer nurturing side, that they're going to come to the relationship a little different. And that's both in personal and professional relationships. No one wants to be in a place where, everything is hard and rough and tumble and I don't need any help and I can do this on my own. And, people that are kind of going into that whole martyr scenario, I'm going to do everything at all costs, even if I sink myself while I'm doing it. No, we don't want to be, that's not healthy. And so what we're looking for is how to have a healthy model of masculinity.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I always thought to be interesting, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is we spend a lifetime, but definitely through childhood, we are very, very proactive in teaching men how to treat women fairly. Not that they all do, obviously, they definitely don't. But in my opinion, obviously, most men want to do good, most women want to do good, most people are great people. That's the way I see the world. We're very proactive with and very concerned as well to teaching young men, boys, to how to treat girls and therefore women. As a woman yourself, do you feel we have the same education towards women at an early age to teach them how to treat men fairly and how to empower them?
That's an interesting question about the education in that space. I do know that there's certain types of education in the school system, and it's more about going into puberty and your sexual education, right? I don't know if they talk about how to treat one another. As part of that, I think they might go down to the aspects that need to happen scientifically, biologically, so that they have an understanding what's happening to their bodies as they're changing. But I don't know that they really talk about the emotional side of the house and how we would treat each other as men and women at that young age. So really, I'm going to be honest, where they're going to get it from? They're going to get it from their friends. They're going to get it from TikTok videos. They're going to get it from music. They're going to get it from what they see their parents doing, their parents' friends doing, and whatnot. And so really they're going to, they're going to parrot what they see. And so it's up to us as parents, as leaders and organizations and whatnot, to really just model what it means to how to treat somebody with respect and dignity as a human.
Yeah, it's in that phase of the development is so crucial. We call it 7, right? 0 to 7 is truly a must, and we learn during that phase. We learn through observation. So in observation of your environments, of your parents, like you said, of your friends, social media, which we're gonna get into a little bit later. But when you're thinking of, in your experience and perhaps expertise also with dealing with men that have struggling manners, how would you say how can we empower parents in the education systems and all people that have a role during that 0 to 7 phase to better embrace this emotion side, the human side that is so necessary to thrive?
Yes. So in the school systems, they are speaking to the social emotional learning. So it's starting to happen. It's part of the curriculum. And so it's another added dimension for people that decide to go into the teaching profession. It's no longer just about the mechanics of the subjects, teaching those, but also incorporating that into the classroom. So I know that that's happening. And so with that curriculum change, then it needs to also extend to the parents understanding what social emotional curriculum is and how they can get involved as a parent to support what the teachers are doing, because the teachers are the foundational peace outside the home. So teachers, the education system, and parents need to band together so that way those messages are coming forward. And that's a slippery slope, I'm going to tell you, because because sometimes parents are like, well, that's my job to teach my son or daughter those things. Why are you all of a sudden going to be teaching those things? And so I'm thinking, well, if the parents aren't teaching those things, well, someone needs to be responsible and step into that role and do that. So the teachers get to do that. I've always appreciated when teachers take on that particular role and it becomes a partnership. It's not about whether parents or teachers can do it better. It's about how can we do this together so we can build these young minds. We can have responsible members of society, healthy members of society, because there's a lot of things that happen in society, and managing your emotions and being able to speak to people properly, it matters.
Yeah, it does. It does, certainly. And through the emergence of all these conversations and obviously different men's having different perspective, different women obviously having different perspective also, describe to me in your finest words, what's a healthy masculine man?
Okay, so we touched upon it. So he owns the responsibility for who he is and the actions he takes, and he does it with respect, love. He does it with care. For at the end of the day, we're all in this together. So he should always be thinking, how is this going to mutually benefit everyone? I think that those are the things, if I had to say, that really wrap up what we mentioned earlier. And being able to say when he's made a mistake or is wrong and willing to go in and fix it. And in this masculine man, he never really thinks that his work is done. He's always evolving and growing, and it takes other people to enter in to bring that forward. So he's open, he's curious, he's committed to becoming his best.
That's a very interesting angle. Very interesting angle. A masculine man is one that is open to always be his best. There's always this very quite cliche, but I think very real saying, which is the purpose of life is to become the best version of yourself. How much do you think that education piece is necessary for men to truly become masculine in the purest way, or the more healthy way, I suppose, definition of the terms? Does education play a big part in the men's room show?
I would say that it's the awareness
Interesting.
that leads to the education, which leads to building and sustaining the practices. So it's threefold.
Yes, yes. And in within those three folds, because I think you're definitely right. Without awareness, obviously there's no contemplation of the need of education in the first place. So it seemed like you guys, yeah, well, you and the guys take an holistic approach to what it is to be a healthy man. And when you're looking across the history, and our understanding of what a masculine man has evolved quite a bit, even through basically millenniums and centuries and different civilization and so on. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think we always had a hard time, or perhaps a delicate time, a tedious time, to truly own in on that's the definition of masculinity, and that's what we embrace? Why is it so perhaps flexible depending on where you are, when you are, and perhaps again, time history?
Yes, and so the reason why is because individuals develop at different rates and speeds and awareness levels. So that's why it's slippery and tricky, tricky, is because of that component. And so some men may already be in that side where they're curious and open, they're responsible, they are into their own personal and professional development. They have really good role models already. So there's men in their life, their fathers, their uncles, in some cases their mothers, where they get to emulate what it means to be a healthy masculine male. And so that's great. Then we've also got other individuals that maybe didn't have that exposure, that didn't have good examples. And so they are on a healing journey from things that may have happened to them in their childhood or their adult life that they need to work on. And so they may not know what good looks like if they haven't experienced it. And if they haven't experienced it, then they may not be, curious about even finding out, because that's painful to go in that spot, let's say. And so that's why it's tricky, because you've got different people in different levels of awareness and readiness to be able to go into this conversation. We also have some men that may be not open. They're more closed to the idea, and they would like to follow in the footsteps of the people before them, and in the historical, the historical of that being hard, because that's worked for so long. And so there may be a little bit resistant to want to move away from an ideal that we've seen for several years, year after year after year. And there's parts of it that work, but there are parts of it that don't work so well. And so, they have to be ready. And so not everyone's going to be ready even to the concept of what I have on the table, which is to be in the men's space, leading it as far as creating the space. I'm not always leading them when I'm in the circle or I'm in the podcast. A lot of times I'm off to the side listening and tracking, and I'll, connect the dots and then bring them back to see if I have an understanding. I'm learning too as I'm, sitting on the sidelines. And so I'm not for everyone. This platform is not for everyone. It's for men that are they're committed to their growth, that they're open to a woman or another perspective. But that's one thing that I will say that I'm very proud of about our show. There's a lot of views that come in and they may be voiced, and I'm like, really? I don't see it that way. that just seems like you're speaking to something that sounds like a foreign language. I've had those moments, and so I get curious. I'm like, why do you feel that way? Or why do you see this as a thing? Because again, I might have blinders on. I'm not a man. I can only, listen to what other men are saying to get an idea and then form an opinion. So on our show, all opinions that come forward from all of the guests, all of the hosts, all of the panel members, they are all allowed. They're allowed to come out. We may disagree with each other, or we may agree, but they're all different perspectives. And that's part of being a masculine man in my mind too, is being able to be open to different perspectives. It's not always easy to hear a different perspective that you don't share and want to give someone some space to give that, right? So that's a learned behavior, and really that's a human thing.
Sure, absolutely. One thing that I think we see as clear as day, and more, unfortunately in this case, but are men that are struggling and have a very hard time to open themselves up to anyone, another man, another woman, maybe a person of basically of confidence in its life. Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's such a hard time? I'm a man myself. And I have the chance to have a truly beautiful life. And I've always been quite an open man. And I was raised by a beautiful mother and a beautiful father also. But that seems to be it's one component that I think I don't fully understand the extent of just how difficult it is for some men to open themselves up. What do you think that comes from, and perhaps how can we help solve that?
Yes, that's a good question. And so for anyone to open up, there has to be trust, first and foremost. And then second of all, you have to be discerning about who you're opening up to. And so I have found from listening to men speak that the times when they've opened up, they've either had something they've said come back and used and weaponized against them at some point. That has happened. Or what can also happen is that people, when they open up, can try to tell them they're right, they're wrong, how to feel or not to feel. And so it feels like that doesn't build the safety in there when that happens. And if you're trying to be the traditional model where you're solid, unwavering, and don't let that get to you, and you don't get angry and hurt or respond and such, that's a hard one to want to be able to be vulnerable. So women can be vulnerable, I think, a little bit easier because of our nurturing side biologically. And so that's a natural state. For men, I think that they can be nurturing and vulnerable as well, but it's more of a learning. So it doesn't come as natural. And so I think that we can move to a place in society where it could become more natural, but the only way something becomes natural is through experiencing a good situation of how that should weigh out. And because anyone that's had a bad experience in any shape or form, it's going to carry over in each and every iteration forward until you have a good one. And if you're not open and curious about it, you're going to stay kind of in that stuck state. And so it's how do we move through it? And I'm curious, Sam, because you are a man, why do you think it is?
Yeah, it's a tough one because to me, like I said, I'm only 20 years old now, so my life experience is it's quite short. It's been truly fascinating from basically, I'd say, even early childhood. My life has been quite different than most. Unique, I think, is the best way to look at it. To me, I see this emerging from a couple of things. First, there's a stigmatizations of men, which doesn't allow them to go basically past this idea in which they think they ought to operate within the world, instead of a way more beautiful and free flowing understanding that actually no, there's all sorts of men, which I think we also need to understand. Temperament is not a static thing. There's women actually that are way more masculine temperament wise than many men, which is absolutely fine, and that shouldn't bother anyone. At least that's my opinion. But I think a lot of men are truly, I suppose, blocked in shielding themselves from the stigmatization by basically keeping everything inside. And what happens as a man, and I know this for a fact, is since we tend to be a little bit more, I suppose, resilient when it comes to the small things that happens in our lives. So what I mean by that is, for example, you get a hiccup at work, and then you come back home and maybe you have an argument with your wife. And what we tend to do is we don't react on the spot. We accumulate them, and after a while, it just explodes like a bomb. And when it explodes, let me tell you something. Most men that I know, it explodes and explodes fast. It explodes quick, and it can be devastating. So that's the first thing. The stigmatization, I think, is a very big piece. The second thing as well is I truly believe, and I want for you to circle back on this as well, but especially in the Western society, the understanding of the patriarchal hierarchy, this understanding that actually no, men are the enemy. That's what I hear very often. Kill all men, which I'm very sorry to say this way, but I hear that very often also. Is I think a very, not only a troubling opinion for the person that hold this opinion, but something that is such a catastrophe because it underwhelms the man to actually understand that no, actually you are necessary, you are beautiful. The vast majority of us try to do the absolute best we can with the tools we have, and so those are the two main points that I have. And do you think that narrative of men again being being a little bit maybe too present, for example, in leadership roles, and maybe tyrannical in many ways to minorities and the other gender. How Where do you think you see, or you're a much older person than I am, obviously. Can you point me to an event or point in Western history that you say that the narrative was starting to change towards just the soul empowerment of women, and more less than the empowerment of women, because that's a good thing, but just the underwhelming evidence that they are actually shaming men for what is a very necessary role in society.
Yeah. I think that one thing that has happened is the societal uh, role that marriage and divorce has played into this, if you think about it, because if either the man or woman decides to get divorced, well, then they have to fend for themselves. And so women are going to like, I don't need a man to survive. I can do it on my own. I can take care of my kids. I can bring in my own money. I can buy my own house and car and buy, I don't need it. That is true. I don't, you know, and so when that exists, that's one component. The second thing is that we've had a shift from the traditional, the woman would stay home, the men would go to work. The United States, for example, became industrialized, other countries become industrialized, and so then you've got someone that not only are they, as a woman, the mother, the caretaker, the breadwinner. and so that has been something that's been introduced that might confuse the gender roles a little bit. Again, independent women, and so, I'm one of those too. And so I work full time. I carry all those different things. And so, but I don't know. I think it depends on the person, because I've never said I don't need a man in my life to do all those things. It's more like, I would like a partner. I like a man to share those roles with, because I don't want to do it alone. And so I'm not in that mindset. One thing that I've noticed shifting, and I was pleasantly surprised, and it's kind of like the flip of what I do in the men's room, but there are organizations that bring in, like there could be an all women type of organization, and they bring in men to actually be facilitators or mentors into these organizations. I was actually involved in a women in leadership course, and I got to be in the role of being a ambassador and part of the persons that could like evaluate the program. And I remember being shocked when there were men that were coming into this women in leadership program, as and they were bringing in their perspectives too. And I'm like, wow, this is wonderful. And it was interesting. You bring up a very good point. I'm visualizing it here, but I was in a group discussion, and we were talking about the role of AI in education, in business, whether it was ethical or unethical to use it, all of that. And there were men in my group, in this group of all women, right, that were being the ambassadors for this program, bringing in what works, what doesn't, what are the issues we want to bring up and whatnot. And we were facilitating the conversation, and the men in the group were holding back and not saying anything really much. And I'm like, we're talking technology here. These men have an opinion on AI, and I know it. So what was really amazing was that I started like asking them questions to engage them in conversation. And so naturally they came into the conversation, but I think that they were holding back because they wanted to respect the space of the women. And I thought, well, that's nice, but I want to have dialogue. And so I need them in the conversation too, to really get not just a woman's perspective about that piece of the industry, but to have everyone's opinion.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you mentioned something very interesting, and I want to dive deeper into it. You said perhaps this individualizations of society, obviously men being more independent, women being way more independent than they ever been across all civilization, by the way, even if you come all the way back to the Babylonians and so on. This individualization has seemed to create a kind of like putting both gender on an island a little bit, and this misunderstanding that actually, oh, maybe I don't know, I don't need the other person to thrive in life, which realistically speaking might be true, but morally speaking seems to be quite detrimental to the morale and the perhaps the joy also of society. How important do you think is gender role in this modern world?
Oh, I think it's really important that we know what our role is in the relationships that we're in for sure. And, with that stereotype of I don't need a man that's kind of come up into a lot of conversations in music and all kinds of different things, then it makes men feel like they're not wanted or they don't have a purpose. And so that could, you imagine not feeling wanted and purposeful. And it's like, how do you fit into that? I mean, that doesn't sound very exciting to be in a relationship and the women are saying, "Well, we don't really need you, but you show up if you want." That doesn't sound very good at all. And so that's an area that does need some attention, that we're not sending messages that we don't need men and we can do it all on ourselves any more than the men saying we don't need women. We could just survive without you. And if you don't want us, well, we're going to exit and we'll leave you to do what you want. It divides is what
It's very decisive, and I think you also touch on a very important point, which this is not to say that we ought to not basically condemn the exact opposite basically view from the men perspective. I believe that there's overwhelming evidence, not only biologically speaking, but because it is literally the only way for survival of the human species is the union between a male and a female gamete. That's scientifically, observably, historically undeniable. And I think that we truly try on both sides, try to refute that for some type of higher sophistication, which is absolutely absurd on many, many level. And when you're thinking about that modern union, like we were saying basically prior to this, there's many women that are much more masculine than many men's, and many men that are much more feminine than many women, and that's actually everything to do with temperaments. That's not a problem. That's not an issue. Nor that it should be regarded as such things. But as we're evolving in society and moving, maybe unfortunately, but I think realistically towards a more and more individuals focused society, what's your best tips or your thoughts on how we ought to collaborate anyways in our understanding that that's actually the best outcome for society and therefore the human species?
I just think we need to have the awareness and understanding that we exist in a world where we should be interconnected. And so not one sex or the other is better, but together we can be better.
Beautiful, absolutely. And that's where I think the collaboration emerge. It emerge any relationship is an exchange of value, either professionally or personally. And we ought to understand that what I bring to the table as a man, a woman, however you categorize yourself, is basically very novel. It's also very valuable to not only who you are, but also the person you're trying to serve. So we ought to bridge that gap of understanding that, again, it is a necessity for the human flourishing. We ought to have families and babies and take care of them and nurture them, and for them to take over obviously professional roles, and that's always how it was and unfold. Do you think that stigmatization and this I suppose eagerness to throw the stone on the other gender without any clear justification is also one of the main reason why birth rates in a modern world and Western world is so low and quite problematic?
I know that we're a very populated planet and that there's going to be increases and decreases. I will say that some of the things we've been talking about today can contribute to that. And I don't know that it would be a permanent problem if there were fewer births happening, because, we do know for a fact that men and women are waiting longer to have their families because they've been putting themselves first. So they're putting their careers out there. They're traveling. They're doing their education. They're doing all these things, and so there has been a shift for a lot of people waiting to have kids older in life. That has been happening, but then there is that what you talk about with women wanting to be ultra independent, and men thinking that, well, I'm going to do the same. And so maybe the wanting to have kids as part of, leaving that legacy, may be less important. It could definitely be. I don't know that it's a permanent problem, but if we were to move too far one way or the other, you do have a problem. And so it's like, how do you bring that back, that the purpose of our existence is to procreate and to raise families and to be productive members of society. That's true.
Sure, sure. And when you're looking at the coming back to the business portion, when you're looking at the men's room show, and in your mission in empowering men, what would be in your words the greatest outcomes when you're talking about it tangibly? What's the envision of, hey, we actually succeeded in our vision and mission?
All right. Well, we're already succeeding in our vision and mission. And I've said before that it's a good day when we go into this space, whether we're having an interview, we're having a men's circle, and I see men coming together and they take it outside the platform. They are helping one another be a friend and confidant. They are becoming a mentor to another man. They are collaborating and doing great work. And, they are exemplifying and embodying the traits where, they're treating everyone, including women, with respect and integrity. And they're just going out there doing all these great things. I can watch it amplify. I mean, there are some young gentlemen in our community, our men's room community, that I have mentored over the years, and I've done it as more of the sponsor. So I haven't said I'm officially your mentor and we're going to go on this journey together, but I've given them spaces, places, and opportunities to practice their craft, to learn how to network with other individuals. They have gotten opportunities to learn how to do some things. And I do that with if you want to call it a container, the community. And so I've got men that do technical things. I've got men doing podcasting. I've got men doing advertising, promotion. I've got men doing all kinds of different things in this environment. And I like to say that because I created this space, that they're going off and doing these amazing things as amazing men that they are. And so when they're out there being amazing men and being their best selves, and then they're bringing in the women around them to join them in that experience, we all win.
Yeah, absolutely. We do. We definitely all win. And part of the services that you offer, obviously, is for example, one-on-one guidance. You were talking about collaborating with the men's room, the men's circle as well, which is great. The podcast, which I think is will become one of the leading format for influent and affluent and just everyday heroes, also men, masculine figures, to be able to share insights into diverse topics. For your implication of that business as you're building it, what's the business angle of it? Well, how do you think you will be able to take this grandiose vision and missions and turn it into a business that is not only impactful but also profitable?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So by shifting the understanding of being what a masculine man is, one that can reach out for resources and help. So definitely there'll be opportunities and spaces for the one-on-one coaching, the group coaching, and this is my favorite one that I want to put out there, but really to have like a boot camp for business and entrepreneurship. So a men's leadership academy. That and so when I say this, I can say this because it's my organization, and I know that in most mainstream organizations, if you said that you were going to set up a men's leadership academy, you would be looked at with quite the eyebrows. And so I like the fact that I can do that. And so, I mean, what better way than to have a boot camp where we get to do things in the entrepreneurial space, and that includes the emotional, how to operate in your relationships. Because if you think about it, all good things begin with communication. You build those effective relationships, and pretty soon you can take those into the leadership space. So that triple uh, area there is the area that I want to focus in. I'm going to do that. Thank you for planting that seed, by the way, because it has been on my mind that I'd like to have a boot camp to where, the leadership for men and be able to offer that, because I don't know how many there are out there in organizations. I know there's lots of ones for women in leadership. So why not be men in leadership?
No, absolutely. And to me, and we're talking about this also a lot on the Meaningful Podcast, which is purpose-driven business, right? This understanding that it started with maybe a challenge, maybe personal challenge or societal challenge, and you turn that into something beautiful and honorable when it comes to in a business setting. And I think that's one of the many things that will emerge from the Men's Room show. And in basically why I think it's so important also to platform this, like I said, is this idea in which men ought to understand. And we've been having some brotherhood, basically community forever, right? Think of the Freemasons, and think of even the Temple years when you were basically a while back in England. There's so many basically community like those. But I think that right now is such a crucial time as the modern world is shifting to a more individualized world, to a world with AI, to a world where I think a lot of things will be ever changing. Having that strong skeleton, having that strong basically backbones of masculine men being able to empower the world will be so crucial. And truly, one thing that I always quite amazed me, and I'd love for you to be able to tell me more about how you came after it. Once you had this vision of basically pulling a diverse men for interviews, for podcasts, the men's circle, and so on, how did you get the momentum to keep basically building that vision? Can you tell me more about how that unfold?
Yes. So really, to keep the momentum, it can't just start and end with me as a woman leading in the space of men's wellness. It requires the men to be active participants. And so I will share all the time that I have a community of men who step up and into the role because they also see this as a need and a want, and they love being a part of it. So I have to keep the momentum by building something that men want to be a part of, because if I don't do that, then I can't really keep the momentum going. It's going to fall short. And that's why I say it's a we thing. And, that's really that simple.
Truly, I think one thing that is so important to keep in mind is with that lines of, again, entrepreneurships, and I want to also tackle on the demographic that you're serving. Are most men that comes to the Men's Room show entrepreneurs and people with business themselves? Or tell me more about the demographics and how do you think that inform the message you're putting out?
Yes. So the demographics really comes from three different types of men. So I would say, number one, creatives. Definitely people that like to do podcasting. They could be coaches. They could be technical in that they deliver training. Definitely that creative blends into the entrepreneurs. And really, I guess the third one, would be anyone that is into personal and professional development. And you don't have to necessarily be a creator or entrepreneur, but you would have kind of that entrepreneurial mindset as is the way I look at it. So that's really who comes into our space.
Very interesting. So when you're thinking about the tool and the process, obviously there's this beautiful community of men trying to better themselves, and as Solomon obviously said, sharpens iron sharpens iron, and which I think is such a beautiful and powerful way to look at it. What are diverse tools that are offered within basically these community self-empowerment tools, or whatever tools that may be, to make sure that the people can outside of that community also be able perhaps to embrace a better self?
Yeah. So the tool that is the number one thing that happens is being able to take traditional networking and throw it on its side. And because really you have to want to help yourself before you can help others. And teaching and promoting the men to take their talents and their gifts and practice them for sure, but then invite other men to go the journey with them to do it together. That is the number one skill that I would say comes out of this group, is to have confidence in self and practice and promote what you do. And then again, extending the invitation to another man to do that. That's how we keep the momentum. That's how we grow. That's how we keep the connection. And when you're doing that, how can you not learn and grow and evolve when you're out there doing that? Because when you can teach someone else how to do something that you are really good at, that you amplify what you do tenfold.
Right, absolutely. And truly, it's a little bit of the fisherman analogy, right? Which is it's better to teach a man to be a fisherman than just to give him fish, right? And perhaps because he will be independent basically at that point, which is such another powerful way to look at what you guys are offering. The when you're thinking of the kind of like the end visions, I want for you to emerge into whatever timeline you have, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. When you're thinking about these visions of it must be bigger than myself, which I think is such a powerful statement that you give. What does that mean, and how do you see that unfold for the main showrooms to make sure that we cultivate the greatest outcome for not only for the men but for society as a whole?
So the time frame that I've had in my mind is that within 5 years, we are going to be in a space where we have several men leading men's circles, several men coming in and being co-hosts, several men leading that academy that I spoke of.
Interesting. So you do basically duplicating yourself and therefore duplicating the circle and impacting more people through it, because you already have an international presence, right? I had the chance to see some people, so it's already growing to multiple countries. Do you have maybe some stats of how many countries are there now inside the Men's Room show? And
with any given men's circle, we usually have about 4 or 5 countries at least, if not more. And so when we do the bigger events, such as the one that we're putting on that is worldwide, I'm going to say we're going to be upwards of a dozen countries. And so that to me is fabulous when we can have that many countries participating in this initiative, in this movement. It's just amazing. And it's why I get up every day.
No, and it is beautiful, and I see it, and I see you're all smiling, and you're quite proud of that. There's something to be proud about that, no doubt. Do you think you have such an international presence, are the problems that men facing relevant across basically worldwide? Are there any difference from where they are geographically speaking? Tell me more about perhaps those relationships.
Oh, I love that question. You know what? The problems and things that men worry about, they're the same. They're the same. The only thing that might be a little different is maybe their cultural background. That will play into some of the roles that are maybe a little more set in stone about how a man and a woman should show up. And that actually kind of came up in a conversation about, there are some women out there that haven't been treated so well. And then they think that if they have a man in their life, that they need to be a little hard on them, and physical violence could be something that they're used to. And I'm like, wow, I just had never thought about that. And I thought, well, is that something that's part of the culture in that particular country, or is that something that's universal? Because that is something that needs to shift, because no woman should feel that a man would ever lay a hand on her to have her be disciplined and to be obedient and to be respectful and to all those things. And I thought, wow, that's really eye-opening.
It is. It is. Absolutely. So those problems seems more to be fundamental to the manly quest of life, whatever you want to define it. And it's something that I really want to get some clarity towards, because that was always one of my favorite questions about, hey, and my favorite basically interrogation more than question is all men, basically geographically speaking, face the same problems and experience basically the same struggle that I've been facing, and it seems to be the case. So to you, there's no real difference between talking to a man that Pakistanis or Portuguese or Canadian or Argentinian. All these, it's very much as simple as it can get, which is it's a man, it's a human being, and let's make him better, right?
That's right. There really is no difference. You would think that there would be, but there really is not. And so it's been eye-opening, because you would think that different cultures and spaces would have a lot of different things, but universally, no, it's the same. I could give you the same 10, and I could take a poll from all of the different countries that you've just cited there and more, and we would find demographically, it makes no difference. You would see certain things showing up.
So interesting. Well, Linda Tilson, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you and exchange and being able to platform such a beautiful missions. I really appreciate our conversation. It's been very insightful for me, and I'm sure a lot of men, but also a lot of women also that wants to get a better understanding of some of the things that men are facing and how that interact with the dynamics. Would you like to share any last thoughts for our audience, please?
Yes, I would like to share that I am very thankful for being on your podcast today, because it very much aligns with the mission of the Men's Room Show and the community we're building. And I would love it if there are any men or women who would love to be a part of this community in this space. I want you to reach out to me so I can meet you, so I can fold you in.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.